for reading our story is Snow White and Rose Red. And this is another fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. And the Brothers Grimm were the two brothers named Jacob and Willem, and they were born in Germany. And they kind of collected all kinds of folk tales and fairy tales so that we could still have them today. Um, the Brothers Grimm wrote the story about the elves and the shoemaker that we already read, and they also wrote other stories like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. So Snow White and Rose Red is by the Brothers Grimm. This is retold by Daniel Munn. It's illustrated by Olivia Chin Mueller. So she did the illustrations or the pictures. Like I said, this is a fairy tale. And remember that fairy tales have certain parts that make them fairy tales. Like it has a beginning phrase like once upon a time or once there was. And that kind of indicates that it happened way long ago in the distant past and in a faraway or imaginary land. Fairy tales also have things like dragons and fairies, witches, giants, and elves, like imaginary characters. They can also have royal characters like kings and queens, princes and princesses. And they can always have a happy ending. They end with that they all lived happily ever after, in which good wins over evil. Now, the comprehension strategy that we are going to use is visualizing. And when you are visualizing, you are making a mental image of what you are hearing happening in the story. So you're kind of like making a movie in your brain about the words that you're hearing in the story. And you try to use all of your senses like sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. So we're going to practice the visualizing strategy right now. There once was a woman who lived in a cottage with her two kind and cheerful children, Snow White and Rose Red. The girls often ran about the forest and gathered berries. The hare would eat out of their hands, the stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat upon the tree branches and sang. So as I read the story describing the girls, I'm kind of visualizing a forest and the animals in it. And I can picture details that are not described in the story by using all of my senses. I can think about my own experiences in a forest. I can hear the sounds and the songs of the birds, the leaves that are rustling in the trees. I picture in my mind green leaves, red berries, blue and gray birds, probably a brown deer or a tan hare or rabbit. I imagine the touch of the animal's fur and the coolness of the shade in the forest. I can smell the trees. One evening, as the family sat together, someone knocked at the door. Quick! Rose Red opened the door. It might be a traveler seeking shelter, said the mother. Rose Red went and pulled open the door. It was a giant bear. He stretched his broad brown head through the doorway. Now remember, good readers create pictures in their minds as they read to help them. And when I read this page, I imagine Rose Red walking quickly to answer the door, expecting to see a tired traveler. Then I imagine that surprised look on her face when she sees a large, scary animal stick its head inside the house. I think about when I'm surprised by something unexpected and maybe a little scary. My heart beats faster. I may jump back or even scream a little. This helps me understand what is happening in the story and how Rose Red feels. Rose Red sprang back. Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm, said the bear. I am half frozen and only want to warm myself by your fire. Poor bear, said the mother. You may rest here by the hearth. You will be safe from the cold weather. In the morning, the children opened the door. The bear trotted out across the snow into the forest. The bear returned every evening at the same time and sat himself down by the hearth. The family came to expect their visitor each night. They kept a warm blanket ready for him and saved some of their dinner. They never locked the door until after their friend arrived. Spring finally came. Thank you, said the bear. You said the bear, you have been so kind, but I must go into the forest and find my treasure. The dwarf who stole it lives below the frozen ground during the winter. Now, as the sun warms the earth, he comes out to steal again. Snow White sadly unbolted the door. As the bear hurried out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his furry coat tore off. For a moment, Snow White thought she saw gold shining through it. A short time later, the mother sent her children into the forest to collect firewood. There, they found a big tree lying on the ground. Near the trunk, something jumped back and forth in the grass, but they could not make out what it was. As they came closer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a long white beard. He had snagged the end of his beard between the twisted roots of the tree. The little fellow jumped about, not knowing what to do. After reading this part about the dwarf, I'm kind of picturing him too. I picture a small fairy tale creature with this long white beard, and I imagine this twisted brown root sticking out of the ground with like rough bark. I can see how that dwarf's long beard could get stuck on that root, and I picture him, he's kind of frustrated and mad because he's stuck. I picture him jumping up and down and back and forth. Even though the story does not describe the sound he makes, I imagine he's probably grunting a little as he tries to free himself from the tree root. By visualizing the description in the story, and based on my own experiences, I understand the experience of the dwarf character better. He glared and cried, "Why do you stand there? Come over here and help me." The kind children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard free. "You are useless," roared the dwarf. Then Snow White cut off the end of the beard. The dwarf grabbed a bag full of gold nearby. As he lifted it up, he grumbled to himself, "Rude girls, cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to the both of you." And then he swung the bag upon his back and went off. Later, the mother sent her two daughters to town. The road led them across a field where they noticed a large bird hovering in the air. It sank lower and lower. "Ah, help me!" came a loud cry. They ran up and saw that the bird had snatched the dwarf. The children grabbed the little man and pulled until the bird let go. The dwarf cried, "You could have done that more carefully. You tore my coat." Then he took up the bag of gold and slipped away into his hole. The girls, used to his rudeness, went on their way. On their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of gold. The children stood still and stared at the treasure. "Why are you staring?" shouted the dwarf accusingly. His face became crimson with rage. There are some descriptive words on this page that help me understand the story. When I read "his face became crimson with rage," I picture that dwarf's face all red. And when I think about that mental image with the illustration, I can understand why that dwarf's face appears red much better. Just then, a bear came trotting toward them. The dwarf cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me! I will give you my treasure." The dwarf scurried away while the bear began to gather the gold. The frightened girls began to run away. The bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid." They recognized the voice of their bear friend. Suddenly, there stood a young man clothed in gold. Okay, so when I see the illustration on page 40, I see the part at the end with the prince dressed in gold. There's a lot of excitement that happens before this scene. Close your eyes as I reread page 40 and imagine the girls frightened and starting to run away. They are taking quick steps away from that large bear when they hear a familiar voice. It's the voice of a friend that they know well, the bear from earlier in the story. And the most amazing part, the bear skin fell off to show a young man dressed all in gold. I imagine the bear's fuzzy fur falling off like a coat, revealing a young man in fine clothes made of glittering gold fabric. What a difference that would be. So let me read that part again and see if you can make a brain movie, all right? Make a mental picture. The girls The frightened girls began to run away. The bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid." They recognized the voice of their bear friend. Suddenly, there stood a young man clothed in gold. "I am a prince," he said. "That dwarf changed me into a bear and then stole my treasure. I have had to live in the forest as a bear until I could get my treasure back." The prince was so grateful for their kindness, he shared his treasure with them. All right. Oops, went the wrong way. I want to go back because there's a couple of vocabulary words that I want you to take a look at. There's the first one. And this is the word here in yellow, hearth. And hearth is a space on the floor in front of the fireplace. And they let him rest by the hearth to help him warm up and be safe from the cold weather.
Hearth. The floor of or space in front of a fireplace. I sat at the
All right. And then there it is, the word expect. The family came to expect their visitor every night. Expect means to look forward to. So they were kind of waiting, looking forward to their visitor coming every night. Expect. And one more vocabulary word. That's the word piece. And it says, as the bear hurried out, he caught against the bolt and a piece of his furry coat tore off. Now, a piece means a part of it that's been broken, cut, or torn from something. So a piece of his fur, a part of his fur, had come off. All right. Good job using visualizing today to help better understand the story, making that mental movie so that you can understand what's happening better. Maybe your mom or grandma or grandpa could read you a story today and you could sit back, close your eyes, and practice visualizing, making that mental movie.